we go. Episode 2 of Signing Off. This time it's Yasmeen up to the plate.
Yeah. This is fine. It's going to be fine.
You ready for this grilling I'm going to give you?
I'm more comfortable on the other side. Comfortable on the other side, but if we're going to ask other people to do it, we have to do it as well.
Yes, we gotta walk the walk as well as talk the talk. So that's why we figured, we'll go first. We'll get it out there. We'll get the ball rolling. We've already had a good amount of people kind of respond, which is really cool, and way more interesting stories than ours. And we don't want to make this the Todd and Yasmeen show, but like we're saying, we want to kind of
a little Todd and Yasmeen. We still have a little ego. Let's be honest.
I'll be honest. It's for me way more than a little ego. Okay, so signing off, Yasmeen Hassan. You know what? You were in Chicago, the third largest market, right? At a network-owned station, and you were breaking news anchor and traffic anchor. You had a great apartment in Chicago, which is one of the greatest cities in the world. And then you blew it. You threw it all away.
You sound like my parents right now, Todd. Have you been talking to my mom and dad?
Yeah. I don't know that there reflects a more appropriate sort of way of looking at things. Is like on paper, someone's life looks one way or another. And then in reality, for them and internally and other things, it's completely different. And so I think of that with you and you're signing off, and when you decided to leave, what in God's name were you thinking?
I'm sure you've spoken to my mom at this point. These are all the questions they want to know. I mean, look, also the other thing with Chicago's amazing. My brother, my sister-in-law were there. Oh, my beautiful apartment. I looked over Lake Michigan. We had a amazing makeup woman. Very few markets in this day and age have hair and makeup. I would roll in pajamas. She would make this happen. It was, you made it, right?
You made it.
Speaking of ego, I'm like, listen, I made it. And
a nice salary.
Nice salary. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Billboards, the whole thing.
Fame and fortune and everything that goes with it, as the song.
It was the life, wasn't it? It wasn't, though. It's that whole almost Instagram, like, look how shiny and beautiful and wonderful everything looks. And listen, it was a great job. And there were plenty of perks, and I got to meet so many amazing people and do some ridiculous and fun things. And we saw so many events and so many perks. But when it came down to it, I went in and talked to my news director, who's our boss. And I told him I eat 3 meals a day alone, almost every single day. And compounded, of course, was COVID and the pandemic and the lockdown. But I mean, Todd, let's be honest, even in the best circumstances, when everything was open, before we knew what COVID-19 was, we ate a lot of meals alone, because you're either, for the most part, you're on the morning show or you're on the night show if you want to be an anchor. So you're either going in at 2 a.m. and going to sleep at 6 p.m. or you're going in at 3 in the afternoon and coming home at midnight, right? So you're missing a lot regardless.
Yeah. And I'm curious for you, was there a moment, a singular moment, or maybe a collection of moments that really kind of hit your soul and said, okay, despite how it looks, this isn't the right fit. And I'm going to have to leave.
I think I would say it was a collection, and even like dating back to maybe even Las Vegas. At some point, one of my very best girlfriends called me and she's like, I'm getting married. I want you to be my maid of honor. I'm like, oh my gosh, congratulations. I love you so much. When are you getting married? And she said, oh, I'm getting married November 6th. What? And the first sentence out of my mouth, I can't go. I can't go.
What are you thinking?
Wonderful. I can't go. How dare you get married during sweeps?
Yeah, and for people who outside, local TV news, November is generally considered the most important ratings month. Maybe November and May sort of goes back and forth, but it's like, all hands on deck. No one gets off under any circumstances ever.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah, how dare you, friend, schedule
how
her
dare
wedding in
you asking me
November?
to be a maid of honor in November? So like
Yeah,
it was just a culmination, I have to say, of a lot of those, and I'm not going to say small moments because that was I still think back on that. And how long ago was it? 10 years ago? I still think back. I'm like, what a jerk I was. Now, if I put myself in that position, I'm like, you're calling someone to be a maid of honor, and they're like, I can't go. Why'd you pick that day? As
yeah, right.
I hear planning a wedding is super laid back. Brides are very easygoing when it comes to things like that, you know?
Always the most understanding moment in any woman's life, for sure.
Lots of adjustments can be made. Um,
Mm.
yeah, so that is a very pivotal moment I think back on a lot, but, I do have to say the pandemic really, made everything a lot lonelier, quite frankly, you know? Um, eating all those meals alone. I was living alone. My brother was down the street, which was a blessing, of course, but he is a doctor and it was a pandemic. And so, of course,
He was a
everyone
little
was staying
busy.
isolated, but he wasn't making any
Yeah.
excuses or any exemptions. I'm like, but what if I just like come over and sit out? No, no. So yeah, I
I could
found
just
myself in
hang
this
outside the
beautiful
window like
apartment.
like a
Right.
cat and just be like just paw at the window. Be like, uh,
What a woe is me. Oh, look at me in my like fancy high-rise apartment alone. But that's really that's how it felt. And I wonder if it was because everything looked so beautiful and I was still so lonely that the difference was it was really noticeable. It was really
mm,
noticeable. And then I thought if I made it to Chicago, to CBS Chicago, and this is how it feels, and it's still not enough, when is it going to be enough?
yeah. So
And
why not in that path say, well, I need to go to network or I need to go to New York or a bigger market and get a bigger role and why that instead of you pivoted, got out of the business and you're now in Austin, Texas. So talk about like a 180. Why did you zig when you could have zagged?
I think that it came down to once you've been in news, I think long enough, or really any industry, you know how the workings of it, right? Like you can move up, you can move to different places. It's the same. It's going to be the same. Hopefully, you make a little more money. You're not going to sleep anymore. In fact, you'll probably sleep less if we're being
Yeah,
honest.
right.
That the more important you are as an anchor, oh, the Oscars are on. We need you to do this, or we need you to go out and be there near the Raiders on like a Tuesday. I don't care if your son has football, right? Um, so yeah, the more you move up, the more events, quite frankly, you're expected to attend and at the same time miss in your own personal. How many birthday dinners have we missed? How many this was the set so that I've been out for about a year and a half now. The Super Bowl, I got to watch the Super Bowl and not wake up a zombie. And
Right.
there's so many things that at least I still don't take for granted. Just being like, I can stay up till 10. And I know I sound like a 12-year-old, but staying up till 10 when you're on the morning show is like, oh, my entire week is going to be trash. It's
Oh
gonna be
gosh, just
trash.
ruined. Yeah, yeah. So you talk about that moment with your friend's wedding as kind of the beginning. What was there sort of an end moment, a final moment where you're like, okay, this is it. I'm doing it.
So I think I was having a lot of those thoughts with the pandemic, and I don't ever and I was under contract to be clear.
Right.
So, and I am very much a rule follower and I want to please my bosses. Um brown noser for quite frankly just to be honest, I like
I
to
would say a
be the
successful person. I would say
yes,
a successful person. Okay.
sure. That's a much nicer. Let's
Yeah.
go with
Yeah.
that. I'm
Right.
a successful person who yeah, I want to follow the rules and I want to make sure my bosses are happy and I'm doing my job. So I was in contract and I was coming up on 2 years and I'm having all these thoughts and I'm having all these thoughts and they're making me crazy. what am I going to do? Am I going to leave? How can I leave? And I went in to talk to my news director in that conversation. And I told him, like, I eat all my meals alone. It's not enough for me. And he's like, okay, what do you want to do? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. It was almost like a therapy. I'm like, I don't know, but I don't want to be duplicitous. I don't want to blindside you. I know that I came here and I signed a contract and I agreed to do a job. Um, Not to mention the fact that I was at CBS during a big merger where so many people lost their jobs and were laid off. And
Yeah.
thankfully, I didn't. And, you have a little bit of that survivor's guilt of, do I deserve to still be here? And now I'm going to throw this away. So there were so many things that I was going back and forth on. But in that office, my boss at the time was like, my advice to you would be just make a decision, because this back and forth, what am I going to do, is torturing you. It's torturing you, and you can go back and forth all day, every day until the end of time. So make a decision and just decide and let me know, which is such a kind thing for him to do. Again, while I'm
Yeah.
in
Sounds like a
contract,
really nice
in
boss. Yeah.
right. He was very, very kind to me and understanding. And I will forever be grateful, because I've also seen plenty of stories where people tried to leave news and encountered a very different reaction.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
What
also
was
have
you?
to give you credit. It's easier to
Yeah.
jump when I had you, which sounds very cheesy. But if we're being honest, it's easier to jump when, you're talking to. Also, for all of you who don't know, I was just making fun of myself. Todd is my most pragmatic friend. I've
Yeah.
got lots of emotionally unstable friends. I love you all, by
Yeah.
the way, if you're watching. Todd is maybe you and Mike Delestrito are my most pragmatic
Nice. Okay.
friends. What are you doing? Let's take a look at this. Let's, remove emotion from the situation. And you were like, yeah, no, I think let's do this. And I'm like, listen, if
Yeah.
Todd says that I can do, actually, Mike even said, maybe you should, you've done all the news things and this is how you feel. Maybe you should try something else. So,
Yeah.
when your most logical people are like, I support you, and you're like, okay, all right.
Yeah. And going back to that, right? And we talk about all of this, and you go from that fantasizing of change of like, okay, first of all, you realize the situation you're in is no longer tenable, right? You realize I have to get out, whatever it is, it's personal and professional. And then there's that point of like trying to plan. And there's the fear, right? The fear of that just kind of grabs you. At least, for me, it grabbed me by the throat. So for you, what were your biggest fears in making this kind of change and signing off?
Oh my gosh. I feel like all the time when we were working in news, I would say, what else can we do? All I know how to do is sit and read, and sometimes stand and read, and never walk and read. So like that is very limiting.
Right.
But it's because that's all we've ever known. We've been in news our whole careers.
Right.
And it's comforting, as chaotic as it can be. It's comforting knowing I know where to start my day, how to end my day. If something blows up, I know how to pivot. I know where to take things. And that idea of like, so I'm just going to do something else and learn how to use email and calendars, trying to figure out the Google Calendar situation, Outlook calendar. I don't even know, folks. I'm still a work in progress.
Yeah.
Yeah, is scary, and was definitely, maybe I could should I just go back? It's very comforting. It's like an old friend, an old blanket, an old sweatshirt. You're like, oh, I know this. It's very
Right.
familiar.
Yeah. The familiar is there's comfort, but there's a restrainment, right? In
Yes.
in that comfort. Yeah. And then also, financially, because that's always a big component of signing off. And not to go into numbers, but you had, like we said, a good paying job, a very nice salary. And
Wasn't
what kind of,
bad.
yeah,
Wasn't bad.
what kind of consideration did that play, and how much of that did you weigh in making this decision?
Okay, here's the other thing, which Todd, I know you know, but people who maybe don't know that, or don't know the behind the scenes of news, we didn't make anything. I don't want to say not anything. I was making like $25,000 a
Oh
year,
yeah.
my
You told
first
me
news
that. Yeah.
job.
Oh God.
I
Yeah.
I remember coworkers saying like we need to look into food stamps. Like
Yeah.
working I was a server while I was working my first job, and I also freelanced at a PR company just to pay the bills. So I spent the majority of my career making fine money. Like it wasn't anything to write home about, but I was fine,
Right.
but um not like, oh, I'm good. I can buy something fancy if I want to, maybe.
Right. Right.
Uh so yeah, I was like, finally I'm making a paycheck, and now I'm like, let's give this up. Financial stability. Um
It's overrated.
but I do think
Yeah.
the fact that I'm like, I got by with much less, and I was okay, and I made it. So maybe I can go back to that.
Yeah, and I mean, and you touch up against that theme that we've heard so much about. Money doesn't buy happiness, and it's not like that you were wealthy and like looking, going yacht shopping on the weekend or something
You
like that.
don't know. You know me and the yacht life.
But it's true. You brushed up against that, right? And that's kind of where the rubber meets the road. We were like, oh shit. Oh, I just dropped the first curse word on our podcast.
There it is. There it is. Episode 2, folks.
Oof, wow.
And you'd be fired from KTNV or CBS or any of the above.
Retake. You said, "Oh shoot."
Can you imagine the sheer panic that would be happening right now if we were?
I just had
air?
actually. My nerves are up. Are being rattled right now. I got to like shake that off. By the way, because I've never done that before. So when you had the financial concerns and you had just the logistic concerns, you're on in a contract, your career, this is something you've been building your entire life for, and you decide to say no. What looking back at it now, what was probably the best piece of advice that you either received, or what was the best solution that you found that helped you go through that transition, and not only in pulling the trigger and doing it, but also through that transition that then followed over the next 6 months?
I think it really was just make a decision, stick with it, and you'll have some amount of peace as far as, well, this is what I'm doing. So I was like, okay, well, I've made all the other I've made the other decision. I've done the news. I've moved I don't think I lived anywhere more than 3 years in the last almost 20 years of my life.
Right.
So I've definitely, I've done all of that, and this is where it got me. So maybe let's just do it. Also, let's be honest, lots of people leave news and go back. I'm like, where's also my very, very good girlfriends who I started off in news with, and I was debating this multiple times with them, and they're like, what is the worst case scenario? You quit your job, you move to Austin, you end up alone and unhappy. You come live with one of us for a couple of months, you get back into news, you go hang out with your brother. Even the worst case scenario, which I think a lot of news people are kind of, our brains work, and I need to prepare for if all hell breaks loose, what is my exit strategy? Always. It's not super healthy, for being honest, but it gives us at least it gives me some comfort, is even if everything is terrible, here is my plan. And I thought, okay, even if everything falls apart and I'm super unhappy in Austin and not in news and alone, I could do something, and it would be fine. I could rebuild. And I've rebuilt again in news, but in plenty of cities, and it wouldn't be easy, but neither is this. So coming up with that worst case scenario and figuring out how I would address it, I think gave me a lot of peace. I'm like, okay, well, here we go.
Yeah. And I'm just, as we start to wrap up here, but the pain of staying where you were started to outweigh the pain of the fear or the risk of of the worst case scenario.
Right. Yes.
Right?
Yes. Very much so.
Yeah. So what did you get right in that decision-making process? And what, if anything, do you regret?
I'm glad that I and I'm sure people will probably tell you otherwise. I'm glad that I told my boss early on. It wasn't crazy early, but it was early
Right.
when I was having serious conversations about it. I'm glad that I told him um, because I wanted to leave on the best best way that I could. And I felt like I did that as much as I could. So it wasn't like, screw you, I'm out, which, everyone probably dreams of. I mean, you have bad days. You dream of being like, forget this
The
on
Jerry
camera.
Maguire, who's coming with me
Right.
moment. Yeah.
So I think that I got that, at least for me personally, it gave me of like, I did this the best way that I could, um, leaving in the middle of a contract and all of that. Something that I regret. I really liked my old apartment. Is that an okay thing to say?
That's great.
I have a lovely apartment now. I do.
You do have a lovely apartment now, but
I have a very
also
nice
in
apartment.
Chicago, I remember like seeing pictures and stuff when we would do Zoom or whatever. It was something you'd see like if someone made a movie about Yasmeen Hassan's life, they would
Oh,
start
can
out
it
with,
be? Yeah, can it be based there?
that's where that'd be like the opening scene would be, your apartment overlooking
Yeah, I
Chicago.
miss that. And I did that on my own. And there's, nothing wrong with having a partner and doing things together and all of those things. But I was like, this is an apartment that I got on my own, and look at the view, and it was white with all the marble and whatever. Anyway, now I'm just bragging and also just sadly reminiscing. But
It's okay. I teed it up. I teed up the brag for that one. So what is your, now as we leave people, we want to leave people with two things always at the end. Number one is your best advice right now to someone who is either contemplating signing off or actually in the thick of it.
well, one, you're never going to be ready. You always feel like, well, maybe in a month I'll have a little more money, or maybe you will never feel prepared. Mostly because you never will be prepared, quite frankly, especially if you are starting something new. You're not going to ever be prepared. And then once you jump, everything takes so long. It takes so much longer than you think it's going to. Oh, I'm going to start a website. Oh, I'm going to have a new social, like, oh, this will be fine. This will take a week. Everything takes so long. Keep going. Everybody goes through it. Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. You're not alone. And you see the Instagram shiny version of everything later. You don't see how many takes it took to get that, and you don't see how long the website and how many versions and how many YouTube videos that I had to watch to make sure the right font was picked, and how many conversations you and I had. So I would say everything takes longer than you think. It's all right. Just keep going. Just keep going.
And finally, I think the most important part for this, as we, give our viewers and listeners, is we talk about all the time with movies and TV shows that we're streaming and watching, and we spend sometimes a ridiculous amount of time, like my wife and I, sometimes 20 minutes, 30, like, more than 20 minutes trying to find something
easily
to stream. And you get so frustrated.
And then you're fighting about that. And you're like, I don't want to watch anything. Just
Yeah.
me, just us. It's fine.
Yeah. So what is it that you have been streaming fairly recently, whether it's a movie or a series that you could recommend people check out if they haven't already?
I am watching Slow Horses right now.
Ooh.
It is on it is on Apple.
Okay.
It is on Apple. It is Gary Oldman. He is like an old curmudgeon-y MI5 leader, and he's in charge of all these kind of misfit, like, oh, you got kicked out of MI5, it's like a CIA spy thriller, but
Ooh.
of like people who got kicked out of the force or they got demoted. It's kind of dark. I have to watch it with subtitles. I get very distracted with accents sometimes, but I love them. I love them so much, but it's interesting. It's kind of funny, but I like a good thriller.
All right. I like that. And my wife too got me watching subtitles because she's born and raised in Poland, and especially with the any kind of British accent, especially, it kind of, she wants the subtitles. And at first I thought, oh, but now, like, especially watching Game of Thrones and all the names and stuff that they throw at you, to have them in the text, makes it much more enjoyable, I found.
Well, Dan had the same reaction. He's like, I don't want these. And there are times where I'll pause. I'm like, those aren't even English words. Because they have their own phrases, right? And we have them in Egypt too. You have certain phrases where I'm like, even if I understood everything, I still would have no idea. And then my mind is going, what were they just saying? And then I've lost the next 30 seconds. It's a whole thing. Anyway, Slow Horses, subtitles.
Slow Horses.
It's great. Yes.
Yeah, I like it. You could check it out. Well, Yasmeen, Hassan, thank you for kind of sharing your story with everyone. Brave as always, and entertaining and thoughtful, and super interesting.
Super interesting. Well, you're up next, my friend. So get ready for that.
Ducking it. All right, that's episode 3. All right, everyone, take care.